In this particular video, we're going to talk some motives in relation to choice and agency and who makes the choice and who's in charge. Okay? So there are two ways to view the world when it comes to, who's in charge or something like that. Westerners that use more of an independent view of the sense, if you recall, if you use the independent view of the self and you describe yourself as, say, for example, tall, you're tall everywhere. This is unchangeable. It doesn't change. And so what happens is that people that have an incremental theory of the world, they view the world as responsible, the opposite, the ability to change it. So they tend to have this notion that they can move themselves to, that is to say, I am tall no matter where I am, therefore I have to change the world to fit my needs. I mean, I am the same person everywhere, but the world keeps changing, so I have to change the world to fit who I am. Okay? Whereas a non-Western perspective often would be this opposite notion of secondary control, that that I am changeable, but the world is inflexible and unchangeable. Therefore, in order to adjust to the world around me, I need to change, right? So the Western perspective is the world needs to change to fit me. The Asian or non-Western perspective is more the world need that I need to change to fit the world. Okay. And so here they did this study and they asked people about an aerobics class and they were like, okay, why did you choose this class? And it's pretty straightforward. The Americans were much more likely to say, because it's convenient, which is to say, I want the world to change for me. Whereas the Japanese participants were 50-50 or ish, but they were more likely that they would say the class is in fact appropriate for me. So the Japanese are clearly adjusting themselves to fit the world rather than expecting the world to fit them. Here in particular, what happens when a move is too difficult? And so what happens here is, the Japanese are more likely to say work harder, as we've seen earlier. When I find when I find my shortcomings, I ought to in fact work on those shortcomings. But you see the American participants here, they were like, if something is hard, what do? Quit. Right. Quit. That makes sense. All right. So, in a similar vein, we got this notion of agency or the ability to make choices. And Western cultures, generally speaking, view agency as owned by the individual. Individual people make choices on their own, whereas collectivistic cultures are more likely to view agency in terms of groups. That's to say, who's in charge. So back during the Iraq War, somewhere around 2007 or 8 or something like that, there was this huge prison scandal where there was a couple of soldiers in this prison complex, prisoner of war complex in Iraq, and they had prisoners and they were just doing terrible things. It was just horrendous how they were treating these. And as an American watching the news, I'm just like, what kind of dumb assholes are these? I mean, who raised them? But it turns out that, the people in Iraq that are much more collectivistic are seeing this and they're thinking there's something inherently wrong with the entire American military system, and then by default, America. And so the bad behavior of a few individual soldiers is not seen as bad behavior, but endemic of America. Okay? So this is really this is the same idea, but put into more of an experimental context. So they had rogue stock market traders, and they asked people in America and Japan, whose fault is it? And it's pretty clear that, especially for the Japanese, when you ask them whose fault is it that this stock market scandal happened by a single rogue person, the Japanese is the company's fault. Whereas the Americans were much more likely to say, no, it's one bad apple. You can't, what are you going to do? You're always going to have somebody bad. Now, when it makes choices, making choices is emphasized here in America more. We have, I mean, we were the originators of Baskin Robbins 31 flavors of ice cream, and I mean, it's just exploded from there. But we just like to make choices. Now, I'll tell you, I don't go to no Starbucks, but I've seen some Starbucks and I've heard of, oh, I have a half left, I often have coffee with a shot of blah, blah, and it's going to be like, I want what I want, and it's very specific. When they opened the Starbucks up in South Korea for the first time, every single person very politely went up and just said, I will have, and then they would pick the menu item. There would be no, add a half of blah blah blah. No, that was what they were going to order with whatever was on the menu. Okay, so people from North America tend to prefer to make their own choices in ways that other cultures do not. So here is a very cool study. They took fifth grade students from an Asian American or a Euro American background, and what they did was they had them play a computer game. And as you can imagine in some of these video games, you get to personalize your characters as a spaceship, and so you can name the spaceship and the color and, personalize it. Then what they did was they had kids play the game. But here's the deal. In one situation, let's say the first on the left here, these kids, they design their own spaceship and then they play the game. And you can see the American kids wanted to play about 5 games. Okay? And you're Asian American, Euro American, Asian American, anyway, 5 versus 4. Then you get to the game, but the spaceship is already designed. Somebody's already given a name and a color and everything else, and the person that did it was not in your in group. And you can see what happens is the American, or again, they're all American in this case. The Euro American children and the Asian American children drop to about 3 each. Okay. But then what's really interesting is right under my head where it says in-group choice. So the kids come to the video game and these choices have already been made about the color and spaceship and whatnot. But the choices have been made by a member of your in-group. And you can see what happened is that the Euro-American children, it didn't matter who made the choice. If it wasn't me, it's no good. But you can see the Asian American children here, clearly, as long as it's a member of my own in group, I trust them, that I'm willing to be satisfied with the choices that they have made before I got here. Okay? And if it's this strong with Asian American children, just imagine how strong it would be with children that have not, in fact, made it to America. So we find a similar idea here with preferences, but instead of this being more of an East versus West kind of a thinking, this is all within the United States. And so what they did was they took people and they had them about a pen. I don't remember the details because it doesn't particularly matter. So what happens is they give them a pen, and they either get to choose their own pen or they're forced a pen. Somebody else makes the choice for them. And then afterward, in some way or another, they ask them how desirable the pen is. I don't know. And so what happens is for the you can see the purple lines, whether people are working class or upper middle class, they prefer to choose their own pen. All right, they like the pen more if they chose it. But if you're a working class person here and somebody else makes your choice, it doesn't affect you all that much. But you can see the upper middle class sample here. When your choice was taken away from you, it really impacted your preferences for that pen. So the same distinctions we saw about making choice in the East versus West type of distinction can be seen again here in working class versus upper middle class.